Well, coming up, it has been called the hardest deal in the world to close. Peace in the Middle East. We'll have a look at the latest on this week's ceasefire deal and look at why it has occupied past U.S. presidents for decades. Thousands of TSA and FAA workers are still showing up to work even though Washington remains shut down. We'll examine how the world's busiest airport can keep soaring as the strain of the shutdown is getting tighter and tighter. And from Transaction Alley to Innovation Avenue, Atlanta's cashing in on creativity. We're going to show you the startups turning big ideas into the next wave of financial technology. All of that and a lot more coming up. This is The Take. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Take. I'm Jonathan Martin, in today for Chesley. We are glad to have you here. Of course, The Take is where we go beyond the headlines and look at why and how stories are impacting you and our community. Experts share what they know, and we also like to have a little fun, too. But we're going to start with this. Buses carrying Palestinian prisoners released from the Israeli prisons arrived in the West Bank yesterday. A lot of people showed up as part of the U.S. brokered ceasefire deal. Israel released 250 Palestinians serving long-term in Israeli prisons and 1,700 others detained in Gaza during the war after the release of those 20 living Israeli hostages. Hamas freed the last 20 surviving Israeli hostages earlier on Monday. The deal, which was signed yesterday in Egypt, ends the Israel-Hamas war and develops a long-term vision to rebuild the devastated Palestinian territory. This agreement is being applauded also by other world leaders. Well, before leaving Egypt, President Trump stressed the historic nature of the deal and the unity at this moment.
This is the first time the Middle East crisis has brought people together as opposed to driving them apart, and to declare that our future will not be ruled by the fights of the generations past, which is foolish. So together, let us continue in the spirit of cooperation and goodwill that has finally brought us to this incredible, historic breakthrough.
All right, so what unfolded Monday really marked a turning point with hostages freed, the prisoners released, as you saw, and a fragile ceasefire now taking hold. But what does that mean? What does the moment mean for Jewish communities here in Metro Atlanta, and how are local organizations processing both the relief and perhaps uncertainty that's still ahead? Let's bring in Dove Wilker, Southeastern Regional Director for the American Jewish Committee, to talk about the impact and the emotions that a lot of people are feeling here at home. Dove, good to see you this morning. I want to start with this. What does this moment mean for the Jewish community, specifically here in Metro Atlanta?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is a moment of unprecedented joy and relief for the Jewish community and for the people of Israel, both in the United States and around the world. I myself was weeping tears of joy as I watched the videos of the 20 living hostages returning to their families, witnessing the end of the struggle that they have faced for over 738 days until their return to their family and loved ones in Israel.
It certainly has been a long time coming. You mentioned you were in tears, were relieved, but is there also perhaps a bit of anxiety? Is that what you feel or what others perhaps in the community feel?
Yeah, to be honest, right now, this is not about anxiety. This is a moment of joy for all of us. For the past 2 years, we have been fighting every single day, calling for the release of the hostages at the hands of a terrorist organization, Hamas. So for all of us, seeing them return home is something that we've been hoping for and praying for. And at the same time, there are still 24 dead hostages who are being held in Gaza for whom we are awaiting their return. So it's not so much anxiety as it is sadness that those families are not complete until their bodies of their loved ones have been returned.
Absolutely. That is still very much part of the conversation. And we saw so much of this play out in real time on television yesterday, a lot of the emotional reunions. What types of conversations are you having within your own circles about what we've seen so far this week?
Yeah, again, today actually is the 2-year anniversary of the attack on the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. So for all of us, part of this is an unbelievable nature that 2 years after this war should now be over, the elation of the families and loved ones being returned home, the fact that the trauma of the Jewish community and for the people of Israel over the past 2 years should also be coming to an end. We have seen an unbelievable rise in anti-Semitism over these past 2 years that has absolutely caused anxiety amongst our community wherever we go, whenever we gather. And so our emotions have turned towards hopefulness and towards relief over the forthcoming future. And also a hope that this ceasefire, that this pause ends, that it continues, so that we don't have to witness any more fighting and any more tragedy for anyone in the region.
Yeah, I think that is the hope from a lot of people. And from your perspective leading into that, do you feel like this is truly a meaningful step toward peace, or perhaps just a pause at this point in the fighting?
I truly believe that this is a meaningful step towards peace. As you heard President Trump say, the gathering of all of these nations, the Arab countries, the Muslim countries, over 20 of them in Egypt yesterday, demonstrates a next step for the future of the Israeli-Arab conflict. And we have to keep the momentum moving forward, whether it's Israel's agreements with Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, Indonesia, even the largest Muslim country in the world, continuing to strengthen these relations, to deepen interreligious understanding between the Jewish and Muslim communities, and creating a path forward for all of us to better understand our neighbors.
And Dov, you mentioned yesterday for you and many others was a day of relief, a day of elation, celebration. How does the community balance celebrating the release of those hostages with, as you mentioned, the realities of those who are deceased and remain in Gaza and Israel?
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to grasp, especially as you mentioned earlier, the release of the 250 Palestinians who were serving life sentences for organizing of terrorist attacks on Israel. There's obviously some concern about the future, about the release of these types of prisoners, about the return of all the dead hostages. And we have to remember that we have to stay focused, we have to stay positive. The creation of the state of Israel is absolutely a miracle for the Jewish people. And so we believe, by believing in miracles, we know that this too will continue and set us on a new path forward, not just for the Jewish community in the United States or around the world, but also, or in particular, for the people of Israel with their neighbors.
And before you go, we have about 20 seconds left after everything that's happened here over the past 2 years. What does hope look like for you in the community right now?
Hope for me is being able to take off my yellow ribbon pin that represents the hostages, to know that those 20 living hostages have now returned home. So I'm hopeful that I never have to put this pin back on my lapel.
All right, Dov Wilker, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you are watching The Take. We've got a lot more coming up. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Let's continue our look at the Mideast ceasefire deal. Joined right now by NBC's Alice Barr from Washington. Alice, always good to have you on. So obviously lots of celebrating that even included some support, though, from some of President Trump's predecessors from the other side of the aisle. What are you learning this morning?
Good morning. Yeah, we've heard from statements from President Biden, from former President Clinton, from former President Obama, also from the top Democrat in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, all praising this deal, offering their credit to President Trump, especially Chuck Schumer. There's been a lot of contention just recently because those are two of the main parties trying to get through this government shutdown. So, credit given where credit is due is certainly the theme from Democrats who typically are pretty oppositional to President Trump, to take former President Biden, who of course was involved in trying to bring an end to this terrible war that's been ongoing for 2 years in Gaza and began while President Biden was in office. He wrote that he is deeply grateful and relieved that this day has come, adding that the road to this deal was not easy and that he commends President Trump and his team for getting this over the finish line.
Mm-hmm. And Alice, we saw a lot of the video, a lot of those reunions, a lot of the hostages being freed. But of course, the big thing still out there is the return of the remains of the deceased hostages, which needs to still happen. How does that process all play out?
Yeah, so at this stage, only 4 out of 28 of the remains of deceased hostages believed to be held by Hamas were returned yesterday. And there are some very serious questions about what that could mean for this peace deal going forward, because that was a stipulation of phase 1, which both sides, Israel and Hamas, had both agreed to. There are some questions about whether Hamas actually knows where all of these remains are. And President Trump has said that there may be teams going in from Israel if Hamas is not able to deliver the remains as promised. Again, it's just not exactly clear what that means, that piece of the puzzle has not yet been held up by Hamas, and whether that could derail the next stages of it, or if there's sort of evidence that there's a good faith effort underway to try to return the remains, whether that keeps things on track. But it's certainly extraordinarily important to the families that have been waiting for closure, at least to bring their loved ones home.
Absolutely, a big part of the process. We know, Alice, yesterday President Trump certainly touted his progress in brokering this deal, and this is really a part of his 20-point peace plan. So looking forward, how much more work still needs to be done?
A lot. So yeah, this is phase 1 that was agreed to by Israel and Hamas. And, you know, there was this signing ceremony in Egypt yesterday as part of the peace summit that President Trump and some 20 other heads of state joined in. But important to note that Israel and Hamas were not actually there to sign. And so, you know, things are still a little bit tenuous. It was more the mediators all signaling their backing for this plan going forward. And what remains to be seen is the really critical step of having Hamas agree to lay down its arms, to disarm. How does that even happen? To whom are they supposed to hand them over is not entirely clear. And then they're leaving power. And then who steps in, of course, to that vacuum to then lead Gaza through its very turbulent next stages. There's the thought of having an international board of peace that would be at least a temporary role, while President Trump says the Palestinian Authority needs to be reformed. But these are broad concepts that need to be really hammered out to determine a safe future and rebuilding, of course, of just war-ravaged Gaza.
Absolutely. Alice Barr, we always appreciate you joining us here on The Take. Thank you so much. We've got much more in store for you right here on this Tuesday on The Take. We'll be right back. All right, we appreciate you being with us again on this Tuesday. For more than 7 decades, every U.S. president has tried in one way or another to bring lasting peace to the Middle East. From Jimmy Carter's Camp David Accords to Bill Clinton's Oslo Summit, each leader really sought their own version of stability. But why has true peace remained so elusive? And what does America's role look like today? Those are big questions. So let's try to put it all into perspective with a friend of the show, Emory political science professor Andrea Gillespie. Always good to have you on. We have you on a whole lot because you always seem to know the answers. So Andrea, I want to ask you this morning, why has peace in the Middle East been such a long-running goal for so many U.S. presidents?
Well, there are a number of reasons to explain the U.S. involvement in the Middle East. The Middle East is a very strategic part of the world. It holds a lot of oil reserves. So for strategic purposes, it is in everybody's best interest for the countries that are located in that region to be able to work together and not be at conflict with each other, because you are jeopardizing a lot of our energy supply. It's also been really important to the United States to provide support for Israel in particular. So Israel was viewed as an ally in the region when sometimes there were few other allies in the region. It had the distinction of being a democracy, so the United States had something in common in terms of what the structure of government was supposed to be. And it's also important for us to realize that the United States has the largest population of Jewish citizens outside of Israel. Mm-hmm. And so for those reasons, it's actually been really important for the United States to play a role in what's happening in the Middle East and to help facilitate peace and dialogue where possible.
And Andrea, we just mentioned Bill Clinton. We also just mentioned Jimmy Carter. When you look back in history over the last 50, 60 years or so, which president has made the biggest real world impact, you think, toward change and peace?
Well, that's a tough question. Many presidents have tried to put their stamp on promoting Middle East peace. I think we would be remiss to not acknowledge that the Camp David Accords still largely hold today, more than 45 years after they were signed. And so that is something that cannot be taken away from President Carter. And what we see now with this new announced accord is if phase 2 can materialize. So phase 1 was just about making sure that the hostages were released and that there was an active cessation of conflict in Gaza right now. But if phase 2 can actually come to fruition and it holds, then that is something that certainly President Trump will be given a lot of credit for.
So how did these past attempts that you just kind of alluded to change the way the U.S. approaches diplomacy in that region?
Well, I mean, most of these approaches, there's certain fundamentals that I think are the same in having kind of, conversations with different folks. If we go back to actually Ralph Bunche's role as a representative of the United Nations in actually helping to negotiate the 1949 kind of end to the 1948 Palestine War, so what created the state of Israel, he did that shooting pool with the parties that were involved in that situation. President Carter invited Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat to come to the retreat at Camp David in order to negotiate. President Clinton was negotiating in secret between Yasser Arafat and Itzhak Rabin in Oslo, sort of outside of sort of the cover of media scrutiny so that they could have an opportunity to be able to talk. This one is being brokered first by the Abraham Accords that President Trump helped to negotiate during his first term in office. So what he's tried to do is to line up allies in the region to then try to help create the conditions under which hopefully the Palestinians can be brought to the table and agree to a cessation of violence and to a different type of governing structure. And it remains to be seen whether or not that's going to come to fruition. But all of these things involve getting people into a place where they are willing to talk and then also where they are going to be willing to make concessions. Yeah,
different approaches. Andra, before you go, I've got about 20 seconds. Given all the frustration over decades, what would success for a U.S. president actually look like? Are we looking at a treaty, a ceasefire, or perhaps just calmer relationships?
Well, President Trump has set a high bar for what he wants to see. And so I think what he is looking for is a new governing structure in Gaza where, one, Gazans have and Palestinians have the right to be able to elect and unelect people who are, in positions of leadership, and also where these leaders are not resorting to violence when they cannot get their way. So that's a pretty tall order.
Andra Gillespie, always a wealth of knowledge for us here on The Take. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we've got much more for you. Don't go anywhere. This is The Take. We'll be right back. Everybody, from loan scams to those sneaky subscriptions and even the growing love for cheaper dupes, many of us are finding new ways to try and stretch a dollar while also dodging the traps that can often come with it. As we do every Tuesday, let's welcome back to the show consumer expert Morgan Ward. Morgan, great to have you with us. So, okay, we have all seen those pre-approved messages pop up, especially when we're talking about loans. So I guess the big question is, what are the telltale signs that these loan offers are scams versus something that we might actually want to look into?
Yeah, we're getting about 134 million robocalls a day, so people are dealing with this constantly. A lot of the telltale signs are things like it's a very specific number amount. Oftentimes it's $52,000. Also, there's a sense of urgency in the individual wanting you to call them back. So they're trying to get you to commit without having a lot of time to think about it. And lastly, it's this very specific kind of voice. Now, the reason that these scams have increased is because it's now so cheap with AI to get access to consumers and also to record these voices that are very hard to discern. 40% of people can't even tell the difference, but they're often these sort of taped voices that sound a little bit different than normal human voices. Those are the telltale signs.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question. AI has really just made it even harder to differentiate what's real and what's not. So what's the best way that we can protect ourselves and our families, especially when it comes to our personal information?
Yeah, the rule of thumb is if you didn't apply, don't reply, essentially. So if this isn't something that you asked for, then don't engage in it. A few things you can do: block unknown callers. Android and iPhone both enable you to do that. And also call back the bank directly from numbers that you can see online. So don't respond to their phone number. Make sure that you have a verified phone number. And then, of course, pause before you commit to anything, because urgency is not your friend, but it is theirs.
Okay, Morgan, I want to ask you about this because we're seeing more shoppers proudly switching over to a lot of store brands. Is this a trend, or is this something that we're just seeing more families try to do to beat inflation? Especially, I wonder, when does it become sort of a dupe, or are you saving money? Because oftentimes, quality could be different, or even safety.
Yeah, no, these are great questions. So there's been a huge increase in dupes because, as we've talked about, there's all this concern in the marketplace about future earnings and whether you'll have a job. So people are turning to oftentimes private label products in grocery stores and really across the board, in clothing and perfumes and snacks and toys. And really what the defining characteristic of a dupe is that it performs and has the benefits of a name brand product. So it's not a counterfeit, but it does some of the same things. But as you said, in the past, these products oftentimes haven't been as good at those performances. So you do want to double check and make sure that these products will perform the same function, especially in the world of food or vitamins, that kind of thing. However, I will say that retailers are really working on increasing the quality of the products that they're offering as dupes, because they understand that consumers need this right now, and it's a profit center for them.
Absolutely. Hey, before you go, I do want to ask you about something I think a lot of us probably deal with, and that is subscriptions. We look on our phone and we're getting billed for different things we've signed up for. How can we track what we're actually spending each month on those subscriptions, and at what point does the convenience of subscribing stop saving time and slowly start to drain our wallets?
Yeah, no, it's so important. Subscriptions seem cost effective in the short term, but if you do the math, sometimes over a 12 or 24 month period, these subscriptions are much more expensive than buying something outright. And the interesting thing is that brands are increasing the kinds of products you get subscriptions to, everything from car subscriptions to printer subscriptions. So we're doing it more and more, and there is a benefit because you have this just-in-time situation where if you need it, it's right there. You might get insurance for things, but as you said, there can be a high cost to these things, and we have to do the math before we commit.
It all adds up as we are all trying to save a dollar here and there. Morgan, we always appreciate you joining us here on The Take. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you are watching The Take. We've got a lot more coming your way. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are wrapping up 2 full weeks now with the federal government shutdown, and here's where we are sitting right now on day 14. NBC News is reporting that House Democrats are expected to hold an in-person caucus meeting later today. The House was previously expected to return to session, but late last week, Speaker Mike Johnson made this week a district work period instead. Meantime, members of the U.S. military are expected to be getting a full paycheck tomorrow. Right now, we're going to look in live from outside the world's busiest airport at the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson, where operations have, for the most part so far, been running smoothly since the shutdown started. The first partial paychecks for air traffic control, their staff are set to be doled out today, but local union and FAA leaders are noting that if the shutdown continues beyond that, 0 paychecks could follow. Back with us to dive deeper into the possible shortfalls that we could see at the world's busiest airport is Tucker Balch, Emory professor in the practice of research on finance. Tucker, great to see you this morning. A lot to still unpack here as this is still ongoing. There's already a lot of stress at TSA, a lot of the agents as an air traffic controller as well. But how high stress is it when you add all of this into the mix? So much uncertainty still.
Glad to be here. Thanks. So, as you said, they just received essentially what's going to be their last paycheck going into the shutdown. And at the last big shutdown in 2018, 2019, we began to see things sort of fray and become more stressful as we got further into it after that paycheck. So I think in the next week and the week after and so on, as that, people have to buy food, they have to pay rent and so on, things are going to get more stressed. As of today, it's not so bad. In fact, on Friday, we had the 4th busiest day this year at Hartsfield, Atlanta. No real strain points. but I think it's going to be getting more strained as we go forward.
Yeah, as time goes on, people have to pay their bills. So what does it mean, Tucker, to the markets and to everyday consumers when we see these federal workers, especially those who are considered essential workers, having to keep working without pay and not knowing when they'll get paid again?
That's obviously a strain on the markets, especially when you consider, they take the money they make and they pump it back through the economy. So it's going to be slowing things down. In fact, across the economy, not just travel, we're going to see federal workers probably holding back on Christmas spending and so on. So it is going to dent the economy quite a bit. They should get all that back pay, although for certain federal jobs, the administration is saying they might not provide it. So we'll have to see. I will say that TSA and air traffic control are going to get all of their pay eventually.
Yeah, and if you were analyzing this as a business, would you say the federal government perhaps is underinvesting in its own human capital at this point?
Yes, certainly. And another point of concern. Well, there's a couple. Let me make two. One, air traffic control. They're affected by this, just like TSA. They're the ones, if we end up having trouble with air traffic, in other words, just travel being shut down, it's going to be because of air traffic control. And they're on a knife edge, and if like 10 people don't go into work, it'll cause problems across the country. And so we need to invest. The country needs to invest in air traffic control, not just paying their salary, but improving the equipment.
Yeah, and Tucker, if these federal tensions continue, because we don't know how long this will last, with shutdowns, labor disputes, and even people not getting paid, what's the long-term risk, do you think, for agencies like the TSA and FAA as well?
Excellent question. There's no question they're going to lose people. People are going to quit, even at this stage. People want dependable jobs. They need dependable income and so on. It takes a while to build up that talent base, especially at management levels and so on. So yeah, we may see lasting impacts on our capacity here in the United States for air travel.
It really is all up in the air at this point. So we're going to check back with you later on. We hope you'll continue to keep us posted on what you learn. Tucker, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Tucker Balch.
Sure, thank you.
All right, we're going to check outside. Look at this shot from our Midtown camera overlooking Georgia Tech. Nice and clear out there for us today. A really nice, cool start to the weather here in Atlanta, but we are warming up again today. So if you get a chance to get outside, this is one of those days where you want to get out. We are going to be in the 80s today as we continue this October. So we had a great start to the week yesterday, and we are continuing that weather as well. Right now to this, the latest COVID vaccine rollout isn't just another booster, but a whole new strategy. For the first time, the CDC is leaving this decision up to you and your doctor, while the FDA limits approval mainly to older adults and those who are considered high risk. So what about the rest of us? Here to help us sort this all out and break it down, look at what's changed and what's next, we're joined by Dr. Mamal Sutar from Emory's Vaccine Center. We appreciate you, Dr. Sutar, for joining us this morning. So how much of a difference could this updated formula make when we're talking about protecting ourselves, especially heading into these winter months?
Thank you for having me. So the updated COVID vaccine is not much different than last year's COVID vaccine. The COVID vaccine in general encodes the spike protein, which allows the virus to bind and infect cells. The COVID vaccines themselves generate antibodies, in particular neutralizing antibodies, which help block the ability of this virus to infect cells. So over the course of the pandemic, there have been many different variants that have evolved, and the current circulating variant is what's called the Omicron variant. A couple of years ago, the COVID vaccine moved to now a monovalent formulation, which means that it encodes for a single spike protein. This year's monovalent vaccine, it's still a monovalent vaccine, but it encodes for a slightly different version of the Omicron variant called the LP 1.8.1. And this COVID vaccine should be able to provide really good protection against these circulating strains.
All right, so how effective are these updated vaccines when we compare them to earlier versions? What are they looking like now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And our team here at the Emory Vaccine Center using a couple years prior COVID vaccine, which contained that XBB 1.5 spike protein vaccine, was able to show that we can generate an antibody response that lasts 3 times longer than what we've seen in the prior years. This is great news, which means that we can stay protected for longer periods of time. Reports have shown that we can expect to see somewhere between a 40 to 50% effectiveness against emergency department visits, urgent care visits, hospitalization, severe disease, and death. And we expect that this upcoming COVID vaccine booster dose should be able to provide similar levels of protection.
All right, so Dr. Sutar, the FDA is now limiting, as we mentioned, approval to those mainly at least who are 65 and older, or those who have certain medical risk or are considered high risk. So looking at a public health perspective here, do you think those boundaries are too narrow? So
that's a great question. And it has been confusing over the last few months as to who can receive the vaccine and sort of what those recommendations are. The updated COVID vaccine booster dose is available to anyone over the age of 5 or older. The recommendation is that the vaccine should be taken and should be prioritized really for people that are above the age of 65, those with weakened immune systems, certain pre-existing conditions. They should really strongly consider getting the updated COVID vaccine booster. And if you're unsure, you should go talk to your primary care physician or your local pharmacist to see whether you are eligible for the COVID vaccine.
Mm-hmm. You know, Dr. Sutar, this is probably a good question for a lot of people as we're heading into the winter months, as we're getting our vaccines. How can we tell the difference between if we have the flu, a cold, or COVID?
Yeah, it's sometimes very difficult to tell whether you have the difference between these respiratory infections. Certainly there's rapid antigen tests that can allow us to be able to differentiate between flu or COVID infections. But what I would recommend is that folks really try to stay updated on their COVID vaccines as well as their flu vaccines. You can get both shots at the same time. And this allows us to stay protected against both of these viruses.
All right, Dr. Sutar, some great information as we're all, like I said, heading into these winter months. We appreciate you as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've got much more in store for you today, so don't go anywhere. The Take will be right back. All right, welcome back this morning. A major move from JP Morgan could reshape how banks are investing moving forward. CNN's Maribel Aber joins us now from the NASDAQ market up in New York. Maribel, good to see you this morning as always. So let's talk first about this new shift in strategy we're hearing about.
Let's talk about it, Jonathan. So JP Morgan Chase says it will invest $10 billion into industries it considers critical to the country's economic security. So the focus will be on 4 key areas: supply chain resilience, energy independence, defense, and strategic technologies like AI. On Monday, CEO Jamie Dimon said it's become painfully clear the U.S. is too reliant on unstable sources of critical minerals, products, and manufacturing. It's all part of a 10-year initiative by the bank to support the growth of large and mid-sized companies. Now, it also comes at a time of escalating trade tensions between the U.S. and China. Beijing recently tightened control of its rare earth assets, which sparked Washington to threaten triple-digit tariffs. Then this morning, Jonathan, both sides imposed new port fees on each other's cargo vessels.
All right, something to watch for sure. So, Maribel, we also want to talk about this. New cars are costing more than ever. We've seen that, and a lot of drivers are also struggling to keep up with their payments.
They sure are. So first of all, if you're in the market for a new car, prepare yourself. The average price for a new vehicle last month topped $50,000 for the first time ever. Now, this is according to Cox Automotive. It also notes the average new auto loan rate is around 9%, and it can go as high as 18 to 20% for those with low credit scores. The Consumer Federation of America says the U.S. auto financing industry is at a breaking point, with Americans owing more than $1.6 trillion in vehicle debt. Edmunds reports that around 19% of car buyers in the third quarter committed to monthly payments of $1,000 or more. I mean, Jonathan, we finance our phones now.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. All right, well, let's talk about this too. Data centers are becoming a hot topic. We talk about them a lot here in the news here in Atlanta. A lot of people in the community have concerns, but now we're learning Google is making a massive investment in them overseas. What are you learning?
This is huge. So Google is planning to build this massive $15 billion AI data center in southern India. The tech giant made the announcement early this morning. The project will roll out over the next 5 years and is Google's largest AI hub outside the U.S. Google expects to invest $25 billion in the data center and AI infrastructure across the U.S. over the next 2 years. India is increasingly attracting multinational players such as Microsoft and AWS to invest in the country's cloud and AI ventures.
All right. Okay. Before you go, I got to ask you about this. Shawty had them apple bottom jeans. We all remember that song, right? You know, it just kind of, it takes you back to your days. But we're now seeing Crocs leveling up with their new T-Pain inspired shoe. What is that all about?
Okay, it's been a while, but I got you. Flo Rida fans can now get their very own boots with the fur thanks to the Crocs. The brand is partnering with T-Pain. The singer featured on the band's 2008 hit Low, referencing, of course, the boots. The classic unforgettable leopard knee-high boot. It's Crocs' tallest boot ever at just over 35 inches. They're wrapped in a plush vegan leopard print fur and adorned with what else, Jonathan? Lots of bling. For Crocs fans who love to personalize their footwear, this limited edition boot comes with a strap, a clip, and metal loop to hang other trinkets on. I don't know, I'm thinking of maybe a Lububu. The boot's debut coincides with Crocs Day, which is October 23rd. If you want a pair, they're $159.99 on Crocs.com or in stores at Crocs Soho, New York. Oh, Jonathan, I'm just starting to get used to the barrel jeans. Those apple-bottom jeans were put away long, long ago when I could just go low. That's it.
And now we're coming right on back up. Hey, you know, it's something new, and you know, hey, there are collectors out there, so maybe this is great for them.
There are.
Yeah, Maribel, we appreciate you as always. Have a good day. Thank you.
You too.
All right, well, Atlanta's growing reputation as the nation's fintech capital just got another boost. A new 12-week innovation accelerator is investing $1,000 in each 5 local startups. We'll have everything that you need to know about that when we come back. Welcome back, everyone. Atlanta's growing reputation as the nation's fintech capital just got another big boost. A new 12-week innovation accelerator is investing $100,000 each into 5 local startups. Everything from apps that help immigrant-owned businesses manage payments to AI-powered luxury assistance tools. With more on this investment, we bring in Kina Pierre, Managing Director for Pinnacle Atlanta Innovation Accelerator. Kina, good to have you here with us this morning on The Take. Okay, so what's behind this vision? This is a really bold vision, creating a fintech accelerator right here in Atlanta. What's this all about?
Well, the fintech accelerator that we just launched is powered by Generator, which is who I'm working for, and the investor is Pinnacle. So we're partnering with Pinnacle Financial, who's had a long time reputation of investing in community-based, doing community-based investment and lending, powered by Generator, who's been around for quite some time, investing venture capital by way of the accelerator model. Why Atlanta? I would say for so many obvious reasons. Over 70% of the U.S. transactions, payment transactions that are processed in the United States actually are processed here in Atlanta. A lot of people don't know that. And that's why Atlanta is coined as Transaction Alley. So this coming at the time that it is in Atlanta, it is actually almost a no-brainer for us to launch it at this time.
I love it. And the program, Kina, is housed inside the Peer Center, which opened just earlier this year. How does that particular location tie into the mission of economic opportunity and equity overall?
In every way, down to the community that it resides in. You're right, just steps away from the AUC, the Atlanta University Center. And you also directly next door to the Gathering Spot. The Gathering Spot has been a long time spot for the last few years for all things that are that's coming through Atlanta, whether it be politics, investments, and just the entire investment and entrepreneur ecosystem right next door.
Yeah, I've been there several times myself. Okay, so tell us about the startups, these 5 startups who got selected for this. What stood out about them and their ideas?
Well, it's with fintech, a lot of the core of fintech is, a lot of it is payments processing. But what, for the selection for me, or what the selection criteria entailed, it was the location and proximity to Atlanta. We wanted companies that were in the Atlanta metro area. That was very key. But also what stood out about these companies is the problems that they were solving. We have a company such as Bullseye. Bullseye is payments processing. Put a button on your screen where you can collect. You take a phone call if you're an attorney, and you can actually track your billing and track your payment just by a button that shows up on your screen. So that's innovation. So it's innovating something that is a billing model that has gone on for quite some time, but it's bringing innovation to that space. We have a company such as Guala that is tapping into micro sellers. These are those influencer markets that many of them are unbanked, but they are generating lots of revenue. And so it's tapping into that market. We have Pagarva that's tapping into the immigrant-based market for merchants. Lux AI, which is coming in to do concierge for loyalty points. So when you look at all them together, and as well as the blended app, which is the app that's helping divorced parents be able to communicate and actually make payments to one another for the needs of the children and their households. So these are all things that are solving some really interesting problems that we have and doing it in a very innovative way.
Yeah, I love how you all make those selections. So each of these startups, they get $100,000, but I love that they also get mentorship. What types of real world support are they also walking away with after these 12 weeks?
It's 12 weeks of, and what I say is that we throw everything in but the kitchen sink. So they're getting mentorship on a weekly basis. They're exposed over the period of this accelerator to over 60 mentors that's in the fintech space, that's also in the space to allow them to be able to do potential partnerships in the future. Additionally, they will be exposed to 40 investors. So they're getting mentorship, they're getting investors, they're doing one-to-one weekly strategy sessions twice a week with me. So we've opened up the generator network, my own network, as well as the network of our partners at Pinnacle, and even one of our other partners with Tarkenton. So they're getting a lot of support that in a 12-week intensified time frame is very rare for a startup to get. Yeah, that access is so important. Yeah. All right, before you go, I do want to ask you this. What type of success, or what do you think success will look like for this first cohort, let's say 6 months from now? Yeah, so 6 months from now, we're looking at, I think success would be you're able to go in and not just download the app, because the apps are all live right now currently, but success would be strong partnerships. For some of these startups, there are partnerships that they're looking for with actual banks. So, it would be a slam dunk to have those partnerships with Pinnacle or with other banks as well. For others, we would see success that could even be conversations around mergers. When we look at success in the venture capital space, we look at acquisitions, we look at mergers, we look at companies that are ripe and prepared for that next step. Yeah, we'll be following up. I'd love to see how that all plays out. Kenneth Pierre, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you for having me. We've got much more coming up for you this morning. Stay right here. We've got more of The Take around the block. All right, before we go, my final take today, and it is a salute to an Atlanta icon and an American treasure. I'm talking about Ambassador Andrew Young. Most of us already know that he was on the front lines of the civil rights movement with Dr. King and later served as Atlanta's mayor. And this week, a new MSNBC documentary will be released called Andrew Young, The Dirty Work. I've had the honor of sitting down with the ambassador. I sat down with him recently for an interview, and I've always been amazed by his humility. In fact, it's almost hard to get him to talk about himself and the incredible historic things that he's accomplished. He's always been about the work, and even at 93, you will still see him all across Atlanta, showing up even in his wheelchair to different events, fighting for the community, which I think is just so awesome. So often the work is on Dr. King. We talk about the work he did with Dr. King, but Andrew Young, as someone who's from Atlanta, I often think about how his work is truly etched into the fabric of this city, from bringing the Olympics to Atlanta in 1996, helping secure funding to start MARTA, and to expanding what's now the world's busiest airport. Andrew Young, if you think about it, has had a huge indelible mark and role in pretty much most big things that have happened in Atlanta over the last 50 years. So every time I see him, I thank him for what he's done for our city, and I think we all should. Thanks for joining us this morning on The Take. Chesley will be back tomorrow. Have a great day.